Assalamu alaikum girls, this is lecture number 5 and we are still continuing with the lecture called How to Critically Analyze Poems, and today we are going to discuss figures of speech. Most of them are quite common to you, but there are going to be some that are new and you have not experienced them yet, but we are going to explain them in examples so it is easy for you to understand. So first of all, you need to understand what a figure of speech is. A figure of speech expresses an idea, a thought, or an image with words which carry meanings beyond their literal ones. So figures of speech give extra dimension to language by stimulating imagination and invoking visual sensory imagery. So that is why it is also called language paints a mental picture in words. So figures of speech are usually a way of turning an abstract idea into reality, an abstract idea or thought that the poet is trying to bring in your mind with all its clarity and details as possible. So the first figure of speech which is most commonly used is a simile. A simile is a direct comparison of two things, usually employing the words like or as. For example, in Tennyson's lines, he watches from his mountain walls and like a thunderbolt he falls. Like a thunderbolt is a simile because it used the words like to compare him with thunderbolt. So maybe the anger of this person has been been compared to a thunderbolt by using the word like. In the other example, in a Christina Rossetti's line, my heart is like an apple tree whose boughs are bent with thickest fruit. So here again you can see my heart has been compared to an apple tree and it's a direct comparison, so the word like is used. Other common examples are clouds like fluffy balls of cotton, snowflakes like soft white feathers, a motor purring like a kitten, a lawn like a green carpet, thin as a bookmark, as contented as a cow, etc. So here you can all see that there is a direct comparison between two things. The second type of comparison is a direct comparison, an implied comparison in which one thing is spoken of in terms of something else. The figurative term is substituted for or identified with a literal term. Metaphors are extremely valuable in making an abstract idea clear by associating the idea with something concrete that relates to one or more of the senses. So here obviously it is more like simile, but without the direct comparison of the words using like or as. So here you can see, and merry larks are ploughing clocks. So larks are compared to plowman's clocks. So when the plowmen look at these birds, they gauge the time. So instead of saying that the merry larks are like a plowman's clocks, there is a direct comparison of saying merry larks are plowman's clocks. And then entangled in the cobweb of the schools. So instead of saying that schools are like spider cobwebs, so there's a direct comparison, entangled in the cobwebs of the schools. Other examples can be she is a jewel. Instead of saying she is like a jewel, you can say she is a jewel. And then sun is a wizard and the moon is a witch. The sun was a golden dollar. The Lord is my shepherd. The web of life is mingled yarn, good and ill together. So all of these are examples of direct metaphor use. The next one is personification. Personification is another type of a comparison in which obviously some human attributes are given to a certain object. So there is an implied comparison and the attributes of a human being is given to an animal, object or idea. Please remember that personification can be used with different things. An object or idea or even an animal is used for comparison, and they are given some human attributes to them. For example, sea that bears her bosom to the moon, and the dirty nurse, experience. So experience is called a dirty nurse. So here this abstract idea has been given the feelings or the personification of a human being, and again here sea has been given the attributes of a human being. Sea that bears her bosom to the moon, for example, how the sea ebbs and flow and how it moves with the tide, that has been compared with a person. Other examples can be the path moving up the mountain, skipping over puddles, trees clinging to the steep hills, winters were fast asleep, the wind was howling, the thunder growled, etc. So all these ideas have been given some human attributes to make them personified, so it is easy to understand the feelings that are attributed with it. The next one is hyperbole. Hyperbole is the use of exaggerated or overstatement of language to make a point. So instead of saying something in a very normal or conventional way, you try to add exaggeration to it. So the idea behind it is to use for emphasis and sometimes to add intensity, and for some time even for humor also. For example, in these lines, here once the embattled farmer stood and fired the shot heard around the world. So obviously you cannot fire a shot that is heard around the world, but obviously this has been added as a hyperbole, as exaggeration to emphasize the point. The other examples could be big as a house. Obviously nobody can be a big as a house, but this is exaggeration that has been used. Starved to death, everyone in town came, on the top of the world. All these figures of speeches are exaggerated or overstatements which are used to emphasize the point. The next figure of speech that we are going to talk about is allusion. Allusion is a reference to any historical or literal or social event that happened, and they are so popular and so familiar to the reader that just to hint them could bring all the resemblance to a reader's mind. For example, we live under the nuclear war of Damocles. He is a Romeo to every girl he meets. So obviously Romeo is somebody who is very famous, and he is famous for his romance. So whenever somebody is called a Romeo, so allusion is to the Shakespeare's character Romeo. When he met her Waterloo. Again, Waterloo is a place in Belgium, but is also associated to Napoleon's defeat. Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo, and then he was imprisoned. So he lost his kingdom right there at Waterloo. So Waterloo can be called as a defeating place, a place where even the unconquerable or undefeated people, they are defeated. So here Waterloo is a reference, is an allusion to a place in history. And but the problem is that you can only understand it if you understand the allusion or the reference that you are hinting to. So if the person reading is not aware of what happened at Waterloo, this allusion is going to be wasted on him. So you need to read deeper in order to understand where the allusion is coming from. The next one is irony. Irony is very common. Irony is when the author's meaning is quite different from what he is saying. So the words do not go with the meaning. So irony as a matter of tone occurs most frequently in prose as a technique of humor, satire, or contrast. So when you say something, but you mean totally the opposite of it. Or in a drama, the dramatic irony would be when the audience knows something that the character on the stage does not know. So the audience comes with a prior knowledge of something that is going to happen, and yet the character on the stage, they are gullible and they do not know what is coming towards them. So here there are a few lines by Mark Twain. When I reflect upon the number of disagreeable people who I know have gone to a better world, I move to live a different life. So obviously here there's an irony that I have seen a lot of people who are who haven't done good, and yet people say that they are going to go to heaven. So I have a different view of heaven. So same happens. Look at this Jane Austen Pride and Prejudice line. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife. So want here has a double meaning, and obviously this has been used as an irony. Something which is stated is totally opposite to what the writer is actually has in mind. And then paradox. Paradox has been taken from the Greek word paradoxon, which means contrary to expectation or opposite in meaning. So this happens when in a single line you have two opposite concepts coming together. So for example, in this line, your enemy's friend is your enemy. So enemy and friend again are two opposite words. So when they come in one line, this is called paradoxical. I am nobody. I am means that you exist, and when you say nobody, so they are just opposite to one another. So again in this line, what a pity that youth must be wasted on the young. So youth and wasted, they are two opposite concepts, but if they come in the same line, it means it is a paradox. Truth is honey, which is bitter. So again, honey and bitter coming in the same line, which are opposite to one another. This is the use of a paradox. Now paradox and oxymorons are usually confused with one another. Paradox is when a opposite concept comes within a line, but they are not coming together. So but in an oxymoron, this is two opposite ideas are joined within a phrase to give an idea of an opposing ideas coming together. For example, cruel kindness or living death. So they are not coming at a distance, but they are coming right side by side. So this is difference between oxymoron and a paradox. In a paradox, you find two different ideas, opposing ideas in one line or maybe in two lines. But here in an oxymoron, these two opposite words are combined together. They come right with one another. For example, if you look here, this is by Shakespeare: brawling love, loving hate, okay, heavy lightness, serious vanity, and again feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire. So two opposite concepts are right side by side of one another. So this is called oxymoron. Again, it is used to highlight the opposing factor of how different the two emotions are. Then you come to pathetic fallacy. Pathetic fallacy and personification are usually confused with one another. But here obviously pathetic fallacy means when you attribute the human emotions to inanimate objects of nature. So the focus is here in objects of nature. So obviously you are going to give a certain mood to moon, or you're going to give a certain mood to the clouds or the air, etc. So the objects have to be the inanimate objects of nature, where in personification you can give different human attributes to inanimate objects outside nature also. For example, a train or a table or a chair, etc. But here obviously pathetic fallacy, you give human qualities and emotions to inanimate objects of nature to reflect mood. So here pathetic does not mean that it is inferior, but it is related to pathos, which means the feelings are being discussed. So here you can see the night has been unruly where we lay, our chimneys were blown down, and as they say, lamentings heard in the air, strange screams of death, and prophesying with the accent terrible of dire combustion and confused events. So this is from Macbeth, Shakespeare. And here the objects of nature like night and air and moon and screams of death. So human attributes have been given to these elements of nature. So this is called pathetic fallacy. Again, exaggeration. This is used to exaggerate a point in order to focus on what is happening. So just to overemphasize a point in order to make the comparison. Then there's anaphora. Anaphora is a figure of repetition that occurs when the first words or a set of words in one sentence, clause, or phrase are repeated, but very beginning of a successive sentences, clauses, or phrases. So you need to find them at the beginning of the verses. I fled him down the night and down the day. I fled him down the arches of the years. I fled him down the labyrinth ways. So you are going to find these repeated lines at the beginning of the verse. So they are called anaphora. Imagery is the use of words to describe the scene. So it is more descriptive in nature. Imagery can use color, smell, all the five senses are used, and you can use them to create word pictures in the mind. For example, this is by Emily Dickinson. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like a stillness in the air between the heavens and the storm. So you create images with words, and these are usually pertaining to the senses, how you see things, how you hear them, how you feel them, how you smell them. So you need to express all those senses in words. Then there are symbols. Symbols are quite commonly used, and they are used in all types of literature. So you are going to find them in drama, in novel, in poetry, in prose, everywhere. So symbols are usually a person, place, action, or word or thing that by association or resemblance or convention represents something other than itself. So sleep is a very common phenomena. It's something that you do every night, but when it comes in a poem or in literature, it is a symbol of death. Dreams again are a symbol of hope and future or fate. Seasons again are symbols of different things. Spring is a symbol of youth. Summer is a symbol of prime of life. Autumn is a symbol of middle age. Winter is associated with old age and death. And as you can see throughout this slide, how different animals and nature and colors and even the objects of nature has been used as symbols. So symbols are very important. Some are very common symbols, and like sea, earth, nature, they are quite common symbols. And then there are symbols which are not very common. So with this we come to the end of figures of speech. So see you later.